Hello, guys. Welcome to Relatable Stories. I'm so sorry for being late. It's the first time, so you can forgive me. I'm your host, Angeline, and today we are going to be introducing men to the platform. We decided, or we have agreed, that it is important for us to involve men in the discussions or in the conversations in order for us to actually get any results. So the question today is, what makes a good man? And we are going to be joined by Mr. Peter Gwaka, my favorite male in the whole world, because it's keeping my sister happy. Peter is a husband, a father, a tech enthusiast. He enjoys adventure and tech and problem solving. And part of the reason why he's here is he wants to help us solve this problem that we have about how to cultivate self-love. And for those that are joining for the first time, Relatable Stories is all about us understanding what self-love is and then practicing it in our own life so that we can become the better or the best versions of ourselves. So without further ado, because obviously I'm late and I need you guys to be still here as we get into this live, I'm going to introduce to you to Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Angie. How are you doing?
I'm great. How's Joburg? It's so cold this side. I don't know how it is that side.
It's getting warmer. It was a little bit chilly the last couple of weeks, but it is definitely getting warmer. And tonight, a little bit chilly, but still okay.
Nice. That's good. Well, I've just given everybody a brief description of who you are. You know, you're like my favorite male. But I'll let you introduce yourself again. Well, not so much into the details that I went into, but what you are doing here and what you'd like to impart on this show.
Well, I guess, I'm here as a guest. I remember having a conversation with you a few months back on, how I felt like your platform just needed a different opinion and, a different look at things. But it was more like a joke for me. Like, I was just kind of like, teasing you and stuff. But it's pretty cool to be here. And, it's always good to share opinions and share, life journeys and life stories on, the different aspects and the different things that we experience. I think we all learn from each other, and that's the most important thing. So, you kind of like get to that point where, you learn from everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. I know it was a joke, but I was like, thank you. Thank you.
It's all good.
We need someone in the hot seat. So now on the hot red seat, before we get into the Q&A, which I'm hoping ladies are expecting to enjoy, I'm going to just go through some of the questions that I had for you. Because on the topic that we have today, what makes men, we have to be on the same page, I guess, me and you. What makes a good man according to you? And if you do have some stories that can show us what you mean, because I think Relatable Stories as it is about making people understand what it is that they're missing. And if you read or if you saw the write-up I made about this particular program, I wanted us to, as women, to take a back seat and say, we all want, good men, right? But would we be able to recognize them if they were to come? Have we not met good men before? Where are they? So those are the questions that we're trying to answer today. And we're hoping that just by talking to a male person today, we'll be able to identify a good man. So yeah, the question is, what is a good
man? Well, I mean, first of all, I don't know if I will assist you to identify a good man, but definitely I can give you an opinion on, obviously based on my frame of reference and obviously how we define, what a good man is. I think, well, firstly, in my opinion, a good man, it just varies. It just depends on who you're a good man to. It's a very kind of broad, topic in a sense, because we could have good men that are good to us but not good to other people, and there's a lot that is very complicated with us men and who we want to protect and what we value, in life. So, I could be good to my wife, I could be the best person to my family, but if you ask about me out there, I could not be the same person to somebody else, but it just depends, and that's kind of like a male complex, because we are good in certain places and probably not so good in certain places as well.
Okay. You're not going to run away from the question, Peter, because, okay, I'm going to get deeper into what you've just said. You said it depends, right? But there's certain characteristics of a man that I think, will just show in any situation or any relationship. As an example, you said maybe you're good to your wife. And what does that mean when you're good to your wife? Aren't there certain things that you do for your wife, even though I don't think you're good because maybe I don't see your kindness, maybe I don't see your respect? But what is it what is making you good to your wife when you have chosen or have decided to be good?
So if we are like narrowing down on, a good man in a relationship, then like, firstly, I believe like every man should always respect their decision. So, like, she is your decision. And then the day you decided to either propose or you decided to run after her, when you saw her in the shops or wherever you bumped into her, you decided to, make a move, right?
Right,
And
right.
just based on that is your own decision. Like, no one has really forced you to make that decision, but it's only you that has decided, like, okay, this is the woman that I want to be with, or this is the woman I want to try out something with. And just based on that, you should always respect your own decision. So if you respect anything about what you do and how you think, and you will always treat your decision with a lot of respect. So she is your decision. That's the first thing that you have to realize. She's not there because um, someone else forced it on you or something like that. You know what I mean? I mean,
Right.
obviously, like, we do live in a very interesting world, so things do happen. But majority, I would say, like, men are the ones that actually go out and
Case.
well, that's what we've been kind of like grown up to, understand that, the man is the hunter, and based on that, you're kind of like
Yeah.
out there,
Okay.
doing
So I,
things.
I I think in any case, even if the girl approaches first, there's some hunting that still needs to happen. So I agree with you. Yeah. Okay. I've heard respect. I've heard that you said because every man should have obviously made the decision to be with somebody, they must
Mhm.
respect that, and that makes that person good. Because once you are respecting somebody, well, that's a good trait. What else are we looking out for when we say this person who has made the conscious decision to be in a relationship with me and respects me? What else can be a telltale sign that the person is good in a relationship?
So, just to be very honest, like, I think a good man has to pay his bills.
Yes, yes.
Like, just being very honest, like, well, you can't think of starting a family, you can't think of being in a situation where you can help out, or be in a situation where you can actually start something that can grow into something, without considering the fact that we live in a world that is financially driven. You don't
Right.
have to have the best job in the world. You don't have to necessarily, be Bill Gates or something along those lines. But I think just being able to cover yourself, first of all, and not be a burden to anybody else. Like, you don't ask anyone else for money. You're not,
Right.
constantly like borrowing and all that stuff. I think, that's like a basic, requirement for what we could call a good man, because we at least understand that in whatever you're doing in life, whether you have habits of drinking or whatever it is that you like doing, you can sustain yourself. And,
Right.
you know, based on that foundation, we understand that you can sustain, because there are repercussions to, bringing people to this world that you cannot sustain. And, you are like literally raising more generations of, certain things like poverty and the like, the list goes on. But basically, if you want to be a good man, you need to at least be accountable for yourself and the things that you want to do in life.
I like that point, because I think that one thing that you are not saying but are saying is that a good man should be very aware. They're not somebody
100%.
who's just going through the motions, asking girls out, dating you, but not really knowing what that entails, because it entails then respecting the person you've invited into your life. It also entails you taking responsibility of taking care of them and the children that might come, or the household, etc. And so you can't be a good man if you're not aware or self-aware, and obviously not making intentional decisions about the future and all of that. So I don't know about everyone who's listening, what you're picking up, but for me right now, I'm hearing, if your man does not, or is not really looking into how he can provide for himself, let alone you and children, then that person is probably someone that you don't want to mix with. That is not a good man. Okay,
Well,
Peter, I think
it's
you
not a
can.
hard rule. It's not a hard rule. Like, look, I wouldn't want to seem as if like I'm castigating,
It's an
men
opinion.
that are trying out there. There's a lot of guys that are trying out there, and like it's very complicated for men and the financial situation in the home, because people go through a lot of different trials and tribulations in life, and remember that whoever you're dating is a result of their background, the men that they grew up around, who they idolize. So there's a lot of complex things around, the kind of people that you'd want to date or who seemingly tick the boxes. You have to understand where they're from, you have to understand their backgrounds, you have to understand who they idolize, because it's not a given that people want to be loved the same, even with regards to like women, not everybody wants to be loved the same because we're
Yeah,
all
yeah.
different, like we all have different religious backgrounds, we all have different, traditional backgrounds, and a lot of men, idolize obviously men that are their fathers, their uncles, and they have some kind of mentors, whether it's a conscious mentor, it's a subconscious mentor, there is somebody that they kind of like idolize and want to be like, and based on that, that's where you will find that a lot of behavioral characteristics, manifest, especially like in the older age. And you actually wonder like where someone gets that from, but it's literally a result of, everything that's to do with their past and their childhood.
Yeah. So you know what, Peter, I will just let you know. We understand that, because on this platform, that is actually what we are trying to help women do. Realize that there's some attributes, some patterns, thought processes, and some things that you do that are based on your past. And you have to change the thinking patterns in order for you to attract the right people, or to attract the right opportunities, and become, the best version of yourself. So there are men
Exactly.
like that, and we acknowledge that people are broken out there, but there is supposed to be, like, a ground where we can say, before, if you do not have this, fine, it's our opinion, yeah, it's not the hard and fast true, but you have to then be very aware that this is not there, and this could be a minefield. If, say, for
Yeah.
example, a man can't even take care of himself, so him being good is something else, but there could be a reason why he's not, and that could be because he also has bad habits. This is just what I'm seeing. But I want to hear more about your definition before we get into the question and answers, that the Q&A session, because the women are already asking you hard questions. Yeah,
So
I see
good.
anything else.
So like it's more of an opinion, not quite a definition, and it's just literally based on what I've seen growing up. What my father did for my mom. And I tell you, like if you look at things differently, like other people would tell you otherwise of the people that I actually idolize in my life. You know,
Okay.
sorry, there might be some background noise. It's just the washing machine is going crazy. But
No worries.
pretty much I've been a person who's been observing a lot of the male figures in my life, their choices, the women in like their lives, the reasons, why they are where they are in their lives, and what they actually appreciate, about marriage and, the different things. And you sum all of that up as an adult and you make your own decision. That's the most important thing. So, like I was saying, that obviously paying bills is a very, very important side of things, because you can't think of having a future, you can't think of having a family, and raising kids. You want to raise kids in like safe neighborhoods. You want to raise your kids, exposed to like certain things that you were probably exposed to as well,
Yeah.
or even more. So there's all these nice things. Obviously it varies with like different people. Some might seem like nice to have, some might seem like hard requirements, but all these things require some kind of like financial bearing. And we all value things differently at the different levels of life that we're at. So you know
Yeah.
a good
Okay.
man for somebody who is looking for someone who can provide certain things, might be different for a good man for somebody who wants to take their kids to a private school, for example, or a super expensive private school. Our standards vary. So maybe, just knowing where you are in life is also very important.
Okay. All right. So I think because the question is really broad, like you said, and also is dependent on the kind of relationship that you have with whoever is your man, I took it upon myself to just read a couple of articles, and I think that there's one that stood out for me that I wanted to just use to ask you what that means for a man before we get into the Q&A. So it did say something about the person having a positive attitude. So I think that what this particular point was sort of trying to say is that a person who does not have a positive attitude would with the person that is pessimistic, right? Not to say a pessimistic person is bad, but if they cannot see good in the world, what good can they bring to you? What do you think about that being a definition of
100%.
why a person can be good or a man can be good if they have a positive outlook for life?
So let's think of a relationship as a business partnership, right? In a business partnership, you want to make money, most likely, or unless you're starting like a non-profit organization, then you're trying to do some kind of good, and the company has goals, the partnership has goals, and for you to move forward, what kind of a partner would you want to, have? Obviously, you want somebody that drives your agenda or that has the same interest as you, somebody who sees things the same way, and somebody who also resolves conflict in a very similar way as well. And you both need to have the same drive towards the things that you want in life. So I find that that translates a lot, because they say that second to the partner that you decide to have in the home, is obviously the partner that you decide to have in business. So your decision of a partner in the home is obviously number one, because that is a person that you're going to be consulting every single day. That is a person that you're going to share life's ups and downs with, and the truth is, like, there is no rosy road towards living life. Life is full of different things. Like, you could marry somebody who's rich now and is poor in 10 years time.
Right, right.
People go through different things. You could marry someone who's poor now and be rich in 10 years time. But depending on what you're looking for in life, there are certain aspects that allow you to at least say that I can go through life with this person despite the different outcomes of what we want financially, what we want physically. But there's a certain level of I can live with this person, and I can, to a certain extent, well, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person, understanding them, and
Okay.
being able to go on this journey with them. Yeah.
Right. And the second one, I totally agree with you. Like, definitely, if I look at it that way, it actually makes more sense now. I think, as an analogy, just looking at it as how you choose your career, how you choose your business, what you do. If you do that better, in when you're engaging people in relationship, you could actually see it benefiting you than when you just take it lightly and expect people to just fall in place and know what it is that you want or need and etc. I think a lot of us do that. But I just want to go through the points here, because I wanted the male perspective of it. What does it mean? They say that he has to be mature. What does it mean to you in terms of describing a good man? What is maturity? And I think that you might have answered the question already with some of the points that you already given us, but if there's more to say, please share.
Look, basically, I think maturity is just, being aware, like you mentioned, actually. I think being aware of, who you are, where you are in life, and where you want to get to in life, and being able to find good partnerships with people, that, can, walk with you on this particular journey, because without that, you'll spend a lot of time on the petty things in life. You know what I mean? You'll spend a lot of time worrying about what other people think about you, what you're supposed to appear like, whether you come from a traditional family or not, you actually worry about continuing the legacy and the like, instead of just being more of an individual and, figuring out your own path. And I think the most important thing with any man is just to come to terms with, who you are and, where you stand in life, and just being honest with yourself. That way, you know exactly what you're supposed to do and, how you're supposed to go about it, and the kind of people that you're supposed to have around you. I think that is a very important point, because, generally, like, a lot of people spend a lot of time on petty things that don't necessarily build towards, their future or, living a meaningful life.
Right. I actually agree with you 100% there. Thank you for those points, because immature people are not focused on the future. They are focused on what they didn't have or don't have, or their past, and they're stuck there. And I think, ladies, this is just also my opinion, that when you find a man who is constantly negative, because you're only sometimes negative because you're in a victim mode, where things have not happened the way you thought they should happen, because you were taught 1, 2, 3, and men is like this, and it's not happening. But what Peter is saying, is what I'm hearing, is you take what life has given you and use it for what you want your vision or what you want your future to look like. And if you're not taking that initiative, that shows a lack of maturity. And I feel that if you're looking for a good man, and that is the trait that they should have. But it comes, then there's the next one, which is faithfulness. It's something that we know is expected of everyone, but but we have a problem with a myth that we are going to try and bust right now, that all men cheat. And so, can you have a good man that cheats or that is not faithful?
Well, I mean, it's not like men cheat with other men, they cheat with other women. So it's a very complicated. It's a very complicated discussion,
Right.
because, I mean, this is just my opinion, but it's a two-sided coin. But obviously, definitely, I believe that there's a lot of guys out there that don't cheat, and I believe that most of the stories that are out there are of cheating men, but not of the guys that are like really stand-up men. I'm in like a lot of male groups, even from like high school. Somebody posts something that's like remotely weird, guys would be like, "Hey, dude, like, we know your wife, you know what I mean? Take it easy." So there is actually a lot of awareness around men with regard to how you treat your relationship and how you treat your commitment. A lot of my friends, like majority of them, I'm not speaking for all of them, but majority of them are actually, very good stand-up kind of guys that I can definitely vouch for. We have a lot of interesting discussions on, even amongst us men, we talk about the one thing that obviously makes, men fall from whatever they're trying to achieve. And, without any further ado, it's just having multiple women in your life. There's a lot of complexity that comes with that. And
dude,
what?
where are men like you? Because the thing is, someone asked me, Susie, you're not asking this now or today, but you asked me, where are all these good men? If we were to ask you, are you saying based on your stats because your friends and all the people in the circle, good men are out there, they're all over, or it's just one or two here and there, and some, well, you just ignore them, then let them be? What is it? Is it that just that we don't see them and we don't appreciate them, or it's a few of the men that are being stand-up men?
No, it's not even a few. Like there's, well, I mean, like I said, it might just vary with the circles, but like a lot of my friends, like I said, that a lot of my friends, they're stand up guys. They're trying every single day to do the right thing. I mean, life is life, and we are still people at the end of the day, But in my opinion, that a lot of people are trying out there. It's obviously not easy because, like I was saying, that you have to understand the complexities behind someone's, upbringing. You have to understand the complexity around who they actually idolized in life, and a lot of the times, as a grown up, you have to make decisions on, changes you have to make in your life, based on who you want to be, who you want to become, whether it's for your wife, it's for your daughter, or it's for your family, or it's for yourself even. So you have to be a person that actually makes conscious decisions to, like, make themselves better, like read more books. You have to, be able to take criticism sometimes, difficult as it is, and just be able to, like, listen more and talk less, because
Listen. The theme around all your answers, and I'm really liking it, is that you're very aware and you're willing to learn. And so I think another question that I'll ask later is around, when you've been taught that men do this or that, and then the people or the men in your life that you idolize have been acting a certain way that most women would say this one is a bad man. Men seem to not know how to then change that, or even want to hear about how that is bad. So I'm not going to ask that question right now. I'm going to go to the comment section and see what everyone else is saying, and then we'll get into that later. Well, your wife is here. She says his woman's bills is better low. So like he has to be able to pay his bills, and if he can also pay his woman's bills, the better. I guess you agree. You guys have talked about this, I'm sure. But ladies, yes.
well, we debate about a whole lot of stuff in this house, and she always has her opinion. I always have my opinion. It's never ending, but I guess it's what keeps us going. But I think it just depends. Like, if you're from a certain religious background, or from a certain part of the world, maybe where women are viewed in a certain way, you might, be the one who pays the bill. I don't know. If you're from a certain part of the world where, women are raised in a certain way, it could be different. So, like I said, like, I don't really take like any like universal approach to what's supposed to happen in a particular relationship. I think it just depends on what you both are actually comfortable with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some people are comfortable with, like, the woman has to be at home, she has to raise the kids. Obviously, it's a very big task, like raising children and raising people in this world. 100% understand that. Some people also are from different backgrounds. They're all about, well, it's not necessarily about what the man wants necessarily, but it's well like what the woman is also exposed to, in the sense
Yeah.
that if she feels that, look, you know what, I just had a baby, it's 3 months is enough, I'm going back to work, I want to have my own money, type of thing.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you both have to just, of which that's kind of like the not so important stuff, because
Come on.
the
Okay, let's
important
go
thing
back
is
to
that you made a
Bible.
decision to walk this journey together, and it's going to be ups and downs, right? So
No, of course. But I feel like in this discussion, what we're trying to say is the man is supposed to be the provider, right? Of course, the differences in our cultures and life itself will be able to understand if the woman is now. I don't think we can even say provide, because paying the bills for me is not necessarily just being the provider. The provider means that you're the leader of a family and you're able to make sure that all things are taken care of, even if it's your wife paying, but you also need to be, that provider. And I think that's the point that we're trying to get at, where if a man doesn't feel that they are providing, things sort of imbalanced. Am I wrong to say that?
No, you're actually right. A lot of the situations, where the woman is working and the guy is not working necessarily, whether it's because he's going through something in his life, whether is in between jobs, or got retrenched because of COVID. Could be many reasons. It always brings about a certain way of looking at things, and I mean, of which it's very understandable, because like, we never really understand where we get these things from, or we never take a step back to understand, why do people feel that way? Why is the man the provider, and why is XYZ? There is a lot of history and background around these things. If you look at our culture, you look at our tradition, and even if you ask our fathers and mothers, like, they probably like first generation to move away from the rural areas and come into the suburbs. How were their parents and grandparents doing things back in those days, where you like had to rely on agriculture, and some kind of is it commercial farming, or is it subsistence farming? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So, like, you had to have a lot of children, you had to have a lot of manpower, and for that to happen, you had to have, somebody who was managing that. And it was most likely around the woman, and there's definitely like a lot of reasons around those kind of things. You look at things like even birth control came around, like probably like in the 60s, something along those lines, and what were they doing before that? There's a lot of context that we need to understand to, figure out like why we are here in this space today, battling what we're battling, and trying to like figure things out. It's not just out of like individual needs, but there is, there's things around that.
So I think that is a good point, in that as we go forward, as we have these conversations, we have to start, doing away with some beliefs that even some men still carrying, because like you said, it depended on the generation and the things that were available to those people. And some of these things carry and they don't actually apply in this generation, but no one has ever or no one has to come and say, guys, let's change. We have to be willing to learn and unlearn some stuff. And I think where we are is a point where we're trying to have the conversation so that we can help other people that are refusing to learn and unlearn things to fit into this generation, so that they can also come to the table and help us understand them, and then we can find a resolution. So let's move on to the next question from Miss Suzio. She says, I know this platform is one of truth and it is a safe space, and you are the first man here, so welcome. Welcome, Peter. My question is, what is the issue with men and vulnerability based on your own experience? Why is this a pain point for men to be vulnerable? 1, in a relationship, and 2, in society when talking to other men, because that's one of the traits of what I deem of a good man.
Okay, so basically she's saying that a good man is a man that's vulnerable.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. Obviously, you have to be vulnerable to certain people. Like, we are human, at the end of the day. But I mean, imagine like a burglar came to your house and your husband starts screaming. Well, I mean, he is a vulnerable person. So like, probably a bad example, but that's kind of like a man's role, right? You gotta keep it inside and man up. So I mean, that's a very good question. Like, it's a complex that men carry with like every day, like who are you vulnerable to, and what are people going to do about your vulnerability as a man, because you're like the last line of defense in a home, in a family where the men in the nation, there's a saying, so goes the men, so goes the nation, it's like when like anything happens, where are the men, so based on that, like, we have that complex of, always looking as if like, we've got this, we don't feel any kind of like emotions, but definitely like it just eats us up at the end of the day. But like I said, it's a very complicated issue. Some guys are more in touch with their vulnerability, and they expose it, and obviously every person does expose that side of them, but obviously you're very cautious of who you expose it to, you know, and how it will be treated, because yeah, that's just it's a
So,
more
so
complex.
So that is the question right there. Why is it so difficult, and why is it that you have to really think about who? Because for me, it seems like even with your wife, you would rather hide that you're scared because you're expected to man up, like you said. So you're not even trying, in some instances, to show your true emotions, even to your wife, who's the person that you have even chosen to be vulnerable with, let alone with your friends out there who can learn from you. So Susio is here trying to say, what is that's blocking this thing? And I know you said it's complex, but from the back of your mind and experiences, what has stopped a man or a friend or somebody from sharing that, guys, I'm hurt that my wife is cheating on me, or I'm hurt that whatever it is emotionally that's weighing them down, or like I have 3 kids and I'm so overwhelmed with emotions and their emotions and all of that. You guys don't tend, or men tend to not share vulnerably things like that show weakness. Why is that?
Well, I mean, that's not entirely true. Like, a lot of men do have conversations that are very heartfelt, and like you might not recognize it because it's not very feminine or very touchy, but you will know that this guy is taking him a lot to tell me what he's just told me in this very cryptic way. Like you have to really understand your friend. You have to really understand, certain aspects. I would like to believe that women are more in touch with their emotions, and they're more in touch with that side of things. And like I was saying, a lot of men, you won't recognize it just by simply like listening, because you'd be wondering like, where's the detail? But he's said
Yeah,
everything. You have
yeah,
to
yeah.
be another man to really pick it up and be like, oh damn, this is what this guy is going through. You know what I mean? And
Why is it so cryptic? Why is it so hard for you guys to just outright say it? Because women, like you said it's not like women. And so it means how women express themselves when they're, being emotional. But you choose to be cryptic and say the one liner. What is it that's making you guys feel that you can't go deeper and just be like, I'm gonna cry now, boys, because this is what's up.
well, it's not really, it's more cryptic to you guys. As a guy, I would have understood 100% what my, what my colleague is like trying to put across. So, I damn right know that, okay,
Okay.
this is, what this guy is trying to express, right? So you know how to treat the situation, you know how to treat the conversation, and you know how to move forward from there. But whereas you guys want the detail, the juicy stuff, what really happened, what was the guy wearing, maybe. Okay, that's not really true, but um,
But But if you Susie help me probe this guy. So so if you said that okay, fine, it's not cryptic to the guys, but if you told me that statement that is supposed to tell me everything about how you're feeling and I don't get it, you know that I didn't get it. What stops you from actually explaining further so that I get you? Because the whole point of being vulnerable is so that the other person can understand you and assist you. Do you get what I mean? Or you can feel that that they can relate and they can give you comfort or help you, etc. So when you do realize that my spouse, my girlfriend, obviously didn't get this from this one liner that my boy would have understood, what is it that's stopping you from making it clear? Does it emasculate you to do that? Does it make you feel weak? Does it make you feel like, I don't know? I'm trying to just get an answer from you.
These are good questions you're asking.
That you don't have any answers.
Like I have to really dig deep
Okay.
and figure out like why do we do the things that we do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, like look, I think like I said, with a lot of men, right? They're not going to be vulnerable around anybody, and unfortunately, they are going to like hold a lot of things inside, because of experiences, you know what I mean? And remember that the man always wants to be the foundation of, anything that's happening, the foundation of the home. He wants to be the provider, you know, and basically he's not going to expose himself, given particular situations.
I like that.
Yeah.
He's not going to expose himself. I like that. Okay. So Peter, I like that word that you've put across. He's not going to expose myself. So guys, what I'm hearing from Peter is guys feel exposed when they share emotions, right? And for us, it's natural, especially in a marriage setup or in a friendship setup where you already established the trust. It's no longer a question of, okay, of the people that I trust, who am I telling all the time? You already have your set of people. With guys, somehow, even in that trust space, there's still a level of feeling exposed that they don't want. And it's because it's tied to their being manly. This is what I'm hearing, Peter. And I think it's true because we've been seeing it a lot. And it's a good question that we are posing to everyone out there. We can have a further discussion on it. But Peter can't answer it right now. We need to dig deeper. We need to dig deeper and find out why. What's the biggest problem? Because we want to raise men that feel okay to be vulnerable with women, with anybody at any time, because it's important. Your feelings are important. Your mental health is important. And we feel that because you're not sharing vulnerable with us, we are not able to, connect sometimes. It just depends. And I think that is what sets apart the relationships that are good and healthy and the ones that are not doing so well at this point. But that's just my thinking.
But I think you also have to be aware that, vulnerability, right, is a thing that is a conscious decision, like I was saying. And if I come to you with a story, based on how you receive that story the first time I come to you, it's based on how that's going to determine, how vulnerable I would decide to be with you. A lot of the times we're told to man up, a lot of the times we're told to just take it like a man, obviously it's the tough road, and we always kind of like have to take the tough road most of the time because, it's part of being a man. It's what you're told, like it's like, this is more of to do with a frame of reference, growing up, being around people, being in relationships even,
Yeah.
that is, that's being a man. You man up, you take it like a man, boys don't cry, there's all these things around, why men just don't expose their vulnerability.
Yeah. And I feel like now, as you said, we women are expecting something that we have not created, or as a society, even we are saying to men, men up, don't show your feelings and all of that. And then when it comes to those men that are manning up, being in relationships with us, we are expecting them to start all of a sudden not manning up. And what is it that we really want? And I think this is a question not a question, it's something that we need to interrogate as women who are listening now, and as men. If the women are that you're dealing with now, not the ones that raised you or that are in society, are saying we need you to be vulnerable, can you try and unlearn some of those things that you were told and try it our way, because maybe it could be the solution. I don't know. I'm going to read the next comment from your wife again. I think it's hard to say what specifically makes a good man, but 100% agree that respect is one of the biggest things. But maybe an easier question to discuss would be, what are red flags when looking at a man? What behavior points to a man not being good? I like that one, Sandra. Thank you very much. Red flags, Mr. Peter. What are red flags?
Look, if you're looking to be in a relationship, right, you're looking to build something, you have some kind of agenda, you have some kind of goal, right? You're partnering with somebody who you want to share a certain journey with, right? So,
Right.
like, I think it's not really necessarily red flags from what I think, but I think, in the journey that you want to, take on in this life, what are your red flags? What are things that you'd actually put as red flags for somebody who you want to take on this journey? You know what I mean? It could be a religious red flag. It could be a red flag around, finances. It could be a red flag around political views. You know, it could be a red flag around dressing. So there's a lot, but it's all based on, like your perception on life. But the thing is, like, we now live in a very, kind of like global world where we all now share different opinions with different people from different backgrounds. And, we all want to be treated the same, but we don't understand that, this guy
Yes.
I'm trying to date is from, XYZ. He probably grew up, with this kind of background. Maybe his granddad was a polygamist. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things around,
Dude, you're being politically correct, honestly, but I hear you. You're being politically correct. I'm sure, okay, if we're looking at your daughter, trying to get married or starting to date, there's certain things about boys or men that can tell you that this person is not going to be good for my baby. Of course, you're not going to be that dad that stops her or whatever. You might just advise. But what are those things that you would say, if you're hanging out with a guy that does this or that, this is a red flag? This might mean that a guy is not mature yet, or is not, he's playing games, because maturity comes with playing games, or this person is not faithful, or it could mean that this person was just a negative person, whatever the case may be. That's why we're trying to get you to tell us the inside scoop.
Angie, you throw hardballs, eh? So, like, I mean, hopefully, like, I will teach my daughter, or I will help my daughter to always attract, the right kind of people that, she wants in her life.
Right.
I think it's all about what you attract in your life, unfortunately, like, obviously, there are very tough situations and circumstances, but if we were to take account of, our lives, and if we were to be truthful about things, we attract certain things in our lives. We radiate certain energies. We attract certain people, consciously or subconsciously. We are always trying to, get to some point in life, and based on that, the universe gives us that. So I hope that I will be able to teach my daughter to always be able to attract, positive things in her life. I hope she doesn't have to go through a whole bunch of guys who are just like trial and error. I hope she'll be able to attract people that are kind and good to her. And, obviously it'll be based on a lot of what she sees from what a man is from myself, and, the other men around me. So I have to, always be conscious about that, what I expose her to, and, will definitely influence the kind of decisions and what she will accept or tolerate in life.
Okay, Sandra, I'm just going to put this comment there. The good men I found in Malbra, that's where they grew up. Yes, I'm going to agree with you, because this one is a good man. I love what your answer, Peter, because definitely you dodged my question, but you answered it very well. if I can say that. Because
I'm not trying to dodge the questions, but
It's good. You did it in a very good way in that you didn't give us the deeds that we're looking for, but you did say, in order for you to not even get there, to ever have to deal with that sort of thing, you have to work on yourself and you need to know what it is that you are about so that you don't attract that kind of thing. And I mean, this is the whole self-love that we're talking about. And that, for sure, it helps you to stay away or to at least not attract the bad guys. And we'll get you in another question, I hope. But those that have really listened to what Peter has said, it's very important for us to understand that we have to start from the beginning, how we are raising our girls, what they're looking for, but how we're also raising our boys so that they can become the men that you want your girls to also date and be with. And we are the generation that is changing the narrative. And I just want you guys to be very cognizant of that. Suzio says, it is a myth for sure because all men don't cheat. There are some good, decent guys out there. Yes, Suzio, I actually believe that. I'm a hopeless romantic, and even though I hear a lot of people say all men cheat, I really don't believe that. That brings me to like the other question I wanted to ask you. Are men always, or a good man? Okay, fine. Let me try and rephrase this question in my head first. Like there's a whole talk about men always want to talk about sex, right? And I wanted to find out, or as a question that came from some of the ladies, if a man is always constantly wanting to talk about sex and doesn't actually pay attention to things that matter to you, does that make that man a bad, okay, fine, not even, let's not say bad man, but like not so much of a good man? Because I think that there's a whole narrative that that's the way that men function half the time they're thinking sex. So you have to excuse them for not caring about the nitty-gritties of your day and your feelings and all of that. They'll just want to talk or do that, so that doesn't qualify them from being good. What do you think?
Well, definitely, like there's no universal law around men and what they spend their time and brain power thinking about. If we put another woman maybe in that position where the guy is constantly talking about sex, and there's another woman who constantly likes talking about sex, they might be a good match. Or it just takes understanding, in a sense. Someone will actually tell you that they're actually deprived of those conversations. They don't have enough of them,
Right.
So it's really boils down to like what you want in life, and I mean, obviously you'll never get 100% of everything that is on your list, of what makes a good man, or but there are certain fundamentals and there's certain things that you probably can live with, and like likewise for like us men, it's not like every woman always ticks the boxes and we're always like on constantly thinking about sex or something like that. We also enjoy like stimulating conversations, entrepreneurship. We also enjoy different ways of thinking, and like if your man is constantly talking about sex, then it just shows you that maybe he really enjoys that kind of things with you, and could be a positive, could be a negative, depends on how you look at it. So it just really depends on like what you want ultimately. And does it mean that he doesn't listen to everything else? This is a private channel, right?
Yes.
Well, I mean, look, if he's thinking with one head, he's obviously not thinking with the other. So, yeah, 100%. Probably not listening to much of what you're saying.
Okay, so it is, I would give this advice based on my own opinion, guys, that yes, men do think of sex, just like some women do think of sex a lot. We have all different, sexual appetites, but I think that in a relationship, in order for you to develop an intimacy that is more than just physical, you have to have conversations. And if all the conversations that you're having have to do with sex, even if you like it too, I think that relationship can be sustained to a certain part, but there's no intimacy, and then that's there's no vulnerability that can happen if your needs aren't being met. How is that gonna work? And I feel that it is a red flag for me that there's no time set apart to just listen to you, like Peter has just told us. When you're thinking with the other head, there's no time and there's no space for the other stuff. So I think it's something that we should be intentional about looking at in our own relationships. But that's just my opinion as well. And I guess, Sandra. So Sandra is disagreeing with something that I said earlier. She said no leaders in marriages, partners is the right word. Okay, fine, I agree. But Peter, before I answer or respond to Sandra, what do you think?
I mean, it depends on what you agree upon in your relationship. You know, some people like being dominated. Some people don't like being dominated, you know. And remember that whenever something happens, that there's always a fallback, somebody that you ask, where is XYZ? Where is this person? You know, and like naturally in life, there's always a more dominant party than the other. You know, like you talk about relationships, you talk about toxicity, you talk about good things even. The dominant force in that relationship, you know, it might not be spoken about verbally, you know, but there's always a dominant force, you know, there's always a dominant somebody. There's always somebody that you're going to start like mimicking. You could start copying your wife with like what she does and certain things, you know, because she just has a dominant character, you know, and likewise with the guy, same thing, you know, so like it depends. But everything always needs leadership. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think partnership or partner, that's the word that we need to use, or that's the approach that we need to take in our relationships, because we're friends, first of all, and we become husband and wife. But biblically, if we're talking about the man becoming the provider and we're also talking about the men leading the household, I think it's only right for us to give the men that role. But I think now the problem with that is that the way it's taken in that context of just it being leadership, it's for some men it means that their word goes without even taking into account their partner's opinions respectfully, etc. That just means, you know, bulldozing, and that's why that phrase leader seems off, and we do not want to continue to reinforce it. But I think that when I was saying that, Sandra, I was more or less trying to echo what Peter was saying, where men has to provide. And some of these things come from like culturally, and we've been told to man up, blah, blah, blah. And it comes from the fact that you do need somebody who's taking care of this family. And that is why sometimes we have to all take daddy senem sometimes.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Just to say that. But anyway, I don't think there's any problem with you putting your man first or like letting him lead.
No,
I don't think necessarily.
I think leadership is not about, you know, dictatorship. Like it's two different things. You know,
Yeah.
like if you're a leader, like, you know, you work more than everybody else. You make sure that everybody else is always good, you know, first before yourself. You know, you
Yeah.
protect, you know, you always make sure that you have a strategy. You always make sure you have reserves. You always make sure you have a plan. If you don't
Right.
have reserves, you're making a plan for the reserves, you know. So leadership is not about authority, and it's not about who has the final say. Leadership is more about, you know, working in a partnership. Like, you know, like a man complements a woman's weakness and a woman complements a man's weakness. Now, without realizing any of that, you know, you're not really going anywhere in your partnership or in your relationship, you know. So,
Right.
you know,
I couldn't
like,
have said it better myself. That is it. That's exactly what I'm saying. So men should be the leaders because we expect them to come into the relationship, even chase us, when they can take care of themselves and think about, they should be already thinking about taking care of you and the family. And that is what you're describing as just knowing the overview of how things are going. Even if you're going to get input from your wife, you have to be the one making sure things are still moving, and that's leadership. All right, and Suzio and Sandra are having a ball in the chat here. I don't know if I want to read everything that you guys are saying, but anyway, Suzio says, "You better defend me if someone breaks in, Peter." Like, so, Suzio, you want a man who's not going to be all chicken when when the burglars come or there's a snake there. I think that that is something we need to abolish. Not all strong. Not all men are strong, guys, and we need to normalize men being chicken, and that's okay. I think Peter, you should be free in your own home to run away from the lizard. Sandra, and Sandra can kill it. What do you
Listen,
think?
nobody wants to die. Eh? I'll tell you one thing. Now, but I mean, look, I think that kind of instinct comes naturally. It's not something that is, you know, it's a natural thing. You know, it's like there's a woman that saved her baby from the jaws of a crocodile. You know what I mean? She
Right.
swam in there. She, took her baby out of the like crocodile's mouth and literally saved her baby and got back to shore. And you
Yeah.
actually ask her like, like what were you thinking? She has no idea what the hell she was thinking because it's instinct. So like naturally, if you love somebody, if you love your kids, if you love your family, that protective instinct always kicks in. Like it doesn't matter whether there's a gun, there's a knife, or a mob of people. You always try to protect. But I mean, like it's not
There's
inherently
certain
important
fears,
everybody.
there's certain fears that we cannot run away from, like the fear of heights, like the fear of heights or fear of snakes. Even though you really want to protect the people you love, that fear takes over. So I'm just saying, let's normalize men being chicken in some instances. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad if they're not able to protect in that way. But if their heart is for protecting you, if they turn around after they've run away and say, "Baby, are you okay?" That should be
That's good enough, I'm sure. Depends.
okay. Then Susa says we are not sangomas. So when you talk about cryptic, what is the code to read these emotions so we coexist? So Susa is still probing on that question that I knew you would not be able to answer today, which will bring it back, the vulnerability one, because you guys are definitely cryptic, and definitely we are not hearing you, and definitely we need to find a point where we understand each other to say the vulnerability is needed. We really need it because we cannot connect otherwise. If you're not giving it, you need to give it. How can we make it better for you? What is it, Peter? Go and think or ask your friends maybe. What is it that is stopping you from letting go, and just saying, you know what, let me just put it in a sentence instead of, in a paragraph instead of a sentence when I do share with my partner. And I think that's very important for us. If you could.
No, definitely. Yeah, like I said, it's a very tough question, and like I think of it like peeling an onion. Like you're literally going through layers and layers and layers until you get to like the core of it. And I
Yeah.
feel that's very true for a lot of men. Like you're literally peeling layers and layers and layers. And it takes a very long time to like understand somebody fully, understand their motives. It takes a lot of like paying attention to detail and figuring out what really motivates them, because remember that there's a certain way that we look at life, and sometimes we suppress a lot of how we might feel inside to please what we're supposed to be like in life. So for someone to eventually be vulnerable with all that training of what a man is supposed to be, it's very difficult. So it's not like a given where as soon as we're dating, tell me all your heartfelt secrets, and it's just as easy as that. It's probably not. It's always constant learning, and I feel the same. Likewise for like a lot of women. Like I'm still discovering things about my wife to this day. We've dated for like 5 years. We've been married for like 2 years, and you're constantly
You guys have
always discovering new things and interesting things.
no,
so
oh, go
so
on.
like with regard to being vulnerable, like it's not a given. It's not like you're supposed to be vulnerable with me. It's a journey, and you need to be willing to go on this journey with someone who you decide to commit to. It's not always going to be easy.
Come on. Yes, of course, there's like you become more and more vulnerability as you grow, but like we have to agree that there's some level of vulnerability that's required for each relationship in order for it to be an authentic one. Because if you're not going to be vulnerable about certain areas of your life and the way, because those things make you tick and they make you make the decisions you make. And they make the next person understand how you behave and act and react to certain things, right? So if we do not normalize men not feeling like feelings are not important, they just have to, man up, then we are robbing the relationship of what could be great. And I think some people are lucky in love. I think you and Sandra had it all figured out, but some people are unlucky because of the lack of vulnerability. And I think or Peter and some of your friends, maybe we need to have, talks with men and, try and understand this whole thing, or help them understand that where we are, the women that we are today, we don't really care about that side of being a man that is keeping them locked in themselves and wanting to, be always on top of everything. I don't know, but everyone else, I think you guys can continue to comment. I still have a lot of questions for Peter, so I'm going to just go through quickly. We're almost out of time. Sandra says you give that many heart attack talking about guys around his door. He answered it well, Sandra, and and you and Peter. Women don't want to hear this. It depends stuff. Give us my answers. And then someone said somebody blocked the wife. Anyway, we're having fun. Sandra, Peter is giving us valuable advice here, where instead of trying to tell you step by step what to look out for, we are looking at the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is you gotta know yourself. You gotta have self-love. If we all could just get there quickly, we wouldn't have to deal with the nitty-gritties of when this happens, do that. When that happens, do that. When you see this, do that. Which is what most of us want right now. I'm aware of it, but it's also important for us to recognize that for the bigger picture, if we could all understand it, just first of all get to know yourself. If only it was as easy as it sounds. But
I feel like one thing that we always have to understand is that, like, even scientists have actually proven that there's no two brains in the world that are the same. Like, no two neural networks that are actually the same. So if you think about two people coming together and agreeing on everything and moving forward in harmony and all that, that is very, very difficult. We always have to be aware that whatever you might think is actually normal is not normal for like somebody else. You will have similarities in certain areas, but it won't always be a given that you'll agree on like everything. So that's where kind of like, those issues start to pop in, like, what makes a good man versus what makes a bad man. It's mainly based on the areas that you disagree and, the difference in opinion.
Yeah. Well, I'm still laughing. This girl is on fire. She says, leadership, we have all seen what men in leadership do to our countries. We no longer want this at Shada. So, I mean, this is just a joke, but I think it's good for us to have some love. Sandra, thank you very much. Of course, the leaders that are leading some of these countries are not doing a good job. But just like how we see good men here, and some of us still think it's a myth, it's very possible that there's good leaders in our husbands out there. And if only we could just be positive and know that they are there. So I'm moving over to my final questions and then my final comments to this. We have dismissed that all men cheat, definitely. We want to find out this whole statement. All men are children. Have you heard that, Peter? That men are children, you handle them like children if you want to be happy. Is that a thing?
Um, well, I, to a certain extent, right? There's a child in like everybody, Like I think it's human nature to always retreat to a certain part of you that resembles like innocence and that side of just being very natural, and I think probably men tend to do that a lot more, and it just depends on which area you're probably like looking at. If it's regard to like maturing and getting over things like buying cars and doing very frivolous things, definitely like it's something that comes over time because like a lot of men aspire for certain things. Like a lot of men love, you know, the things that would make them seemingly more attractive to women. So yes, to a certain extent, like we do sometimes behave like little boys, but I think it just comes with just being natural and just living life to a certain extent, being naive sometimes, which is probably like a very human thing to do.
I think thank you for that answer. I think I understand what you're trying to say, that some certain things, behavioral things that you guys do, you can recognize that it's almost like being a kid, but at the same time it's because you feel that you have to in order to become the man that you're expected by the world to be. So for example, the world being the ladies like girl men that drive Porsche cars or whatever it is. So you start to chase those toys or whatever. Or in other instances, which is the point that most the statement is always brought about, is that you can't sort of like have one girlfriend because you like playing, and so we are not. It doesn't necessarily mean anything because we're like children. So ignore that, and be the wife and the kind of that, and that is what we are trying to dismiss. Do you think in that specific area, men are children?
Look, it's always complicated with me. We have like a history of different things that vary with every background. Like you look at certain areas, whether it's European or American or Asian, where the history does not involve polygamy. Then it's not a thing in those communities to actually have multiple partners or feel that you need to you know have a wife here and a girlfriend there. We have a history of polygamy in our African society, and unfortunately, like it's something that we are unlearning. It's something that we are starting to But remember, like I said, that there's reasons why marriages and certain things were structured that way in the past. And of which
Yeah.
we're no longer in the past. We are moving now in a different kind of towards like a different kind of future. So it doesn't always constitute a bad man, like in the sense that certain women get into polygamy knowing that I'm getting into polygamy, and like I
Yeah.
said, that men don't cheat with men; they cheat with other women in certain instances.
Yeah.
It's 2021, so
Yeah.
the women that they cheat with know that this guy is married. They are well aware that there's his wife, or XYZ. So like it's a very very complicated kind of structure, but definitely it's something that a lot of people are like unlearning, and based on your contract based on what you agree on when you actually get into a relationship or when you get into a marriage, I think that is what you should actually take to heart the most, and adhere to, because obviously, like if you get into something with somebody and you agree that, look, it's okay for us to have like multiple partners, then nobody should be, judge you guys or judge what you're doing. It's a free world, right? But if
Right.
you get into something and you agree that, look, this is a very exclusive thing, like, this is just you and I, and this is what we both want because, we want to achieve XYZ, then 100%, you should be held accountable if you found otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna leave you on that one, definitely. And I think, guys, Peter has alluded to the topic we had last week, the other woman, where we're saying that if we do not want to endorse or say that this thing is normal and we should accept it, we as women should also start to stop being part of the problem and be part of the solution, and leave these guys that are still having the appetite to have multiple women, even if their contracts or their agreements with their partners is, let's not do that. And let's leave them without an opportunity or a chance to even, cheat, unless obviously you're being fooled, and that has been known to happen before. Peter, I do not want to keep you longer than you should be here, but I still have a couple of more questions. How
That's
you
fine.
doing? Okay, good. We can have an extended version of this one because we don't always have guys here. So, I think we have actually done this one where I wanted to ask, does the world teach our males to mask their emotions, which is the same one as the vulnerability issue, where we do definitely agree that you guys are being asked, or the way we are raised, it indirectly teaches you to mask your emotions in certain areas. So
Yeah,
I think,
no, 100%.
okay. Do men feel it is not manly to take guidance on how to act from women? Do you think that there is a general feeling that if women are the ones guiding, not necessarily in a relationship, your marriage, especially don't talk about your marriage, I think that's different. But do you think, like, on a general level, guys feel that it's emasculating to take guidance from a woman? Because sometimes I have heard women say in marriages, well, I have to keep saying it, and I have to make it seem like it was his idea so that he can actually run with it. So there's been like normalizing the fact that if the idea is mine or a woman's idea, the men won't take it because they feel emasculated. What's your take?
I think it's not just men only, but nobody likes being told what to do. Like, in any relationship or in any, kind of like partnership. Like, if you tell somebody that this is your flaw and this is what you're supposed to do, no one really takes that advice immediately. So naturally, like, as like human beings, we always think that we are in control. We always think that, we know what we're doing. I mean, we have made it this far so far, and we think we're doing, we might have some bumps here and there, but we think we're doing pretty okay. We're trying to like figure things out.
Right.
So when someone comes at you like negative, automatically you're not going to listen instantly, because you always want solutions to your life to come from you, and naturally, like with any argument or with any kind of conversation, the moment you think that you know more about someone's life more than they do, then automatically you're trying to just start a war. You know what I mean? Because the person is obviously going to try and like defend themselves and tell you like all these kind of reasons as to why you're wrong. So naturally, I always feel that yes, they are right. If you're in a relationship, if you're in a marriage, if you're in some kind of like long-term thing, take your time, understand your person, understand how to actually communicate things for your benefit. Like telling someone or like yelling at someone doesn't solve any problem. It just simply starts to create some kind of toxicness in the whole relationship. You know what I mean? So
Right.
you have to take time to understand your partner, take time to listen, and sometimes even when they're not paying attention, give them time, because you are married forever, right? Why are you
Right.
rushing? You know what I mean?
Okay.
So,
I think I actually quite understand that, because from what you were saying, I heard that point. It rang in my head that I was trying to express at the time, that sometimes you think you know more about somebody else's life than they do. And that is not true. People might have blind spots, but I think everyone should be able to know more about what makes them happy than anyone else. And so if you're going to give advice, or if you're going to point out a blind spot, you must find a way to say it in a way that doesn't take away that they are a whole person who is capable of, driving their own lives and being successful at it. And I've just learned something there. Thank you very much, Peter. Last question, do you guys think that women are too complex to understand and so you just give up?
Well, I mean, personally, I don't really try to understand, because it's too complicated, you know what I mean?
Right.
But, like, instead of trying to understand women, or men even, you just always have to appreciate the good side of things. And that's how I always take life. You look at the positives, I look at all the things that, my wife and the women in my life do for me, which is just never giving up on me, always being there, always showing me love, always giving me instructions on what to do in my life. But these are all positive things, they're all good things, and for myself to try to like figure out, women completely, like it's very difficult. You'd have to be a woman, to understand women, and maybe even not, like maybe women don't even understand women. I don't know, but it's just a rabbit hole to try to like figure out like what are women all about, what do they like, because everybody's different. And I always believe in individualism versus more of like group kind of thinking. Like people will tell you that women are XYZ, but it's not true for every single woman. Everybody has a frame of reference. Everybody has things that they like, that they dislike. We all have different things that we meet in this, life journey. So you should always find out your own truth about somebody. You know what I mean? And just always figure things out for yourself, as always, because that is where the truth is. Don't take like universal opinions on what marriage is, or what a relationship is, or what XYZ is, or what a person is like. So always be willing to find out for yourself.
Wow, that is profound. I like that. I could close on that statement because, and a lot of times we do find ourselves comparing and using a template that somebody else has said, and we're not allowing people to be who they are or even show us who they are. And we're busy trying to control the picture of what we think a marriage, a relationship, or whatever should be without actually taking into account the individuality. And so we are boxing some of our good men and making them toxic in the process, because someone will have to react to control your control or your negging or whatever it is that might be happening, because they are not conforming to what somebody told you is a good man, or what society has defined to be a good man or a good marriage, and what it's supposed to look like. And I think that after having said that, Peter, I don't know if you have any last remarks. I've got a lot, but I'm going to let you go. I think that I have been able to understand more what a man's mind works like, and I feel like I can engage in conversations with men in a way that doesn't is not attacking. And I think most of the times we come off as attacking. We have the statement, "Oh, men are trash." Yes, it came from gender-based violence that is a high rate at this point, but if we then say something so definitive, we are then bracketing even the good men, and that could possibly antagonize them, and they don't want to come to the forum. So it's something that I'm passionate about changing. And I wanted you to just say a few last words about all of that, if you have any.
Well, definitely, like we have a long way to go as society, because, like I said earlier on, so goes the men, so goes the nation. Men play a very important role in the world, in our lives, as protectors, as all kinds of roles, and we need to have more conversations, even as men, honest conversations. We need to figure out, how we can make the upcoming generation better, how we can make ourselves better, and not always just hide behind this masculine toxicity. With regards to women looking for good men out there, definitely there's a whole bunch of good men out there. There's a whole lot of nice guys, but most importantly, remember that, you also attract certain things in your life. You need to radiate that good energy. You need to radiate that positiveness. We're all broken. We are all like trying to guard ourselves at every single point in time. But you also have to know at to what level is this still guarding yourself, or is this not just becoming toxic in a relationship? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we just have to figure out when we move on in life and how we let go of the past and how we figure out, how we can become better people. Because like I said, at the end of the day, we attract certain things in our lives, and, we need to attract the positive things.
Right. Thank you, Peter. That is like beautiful. We obviously have one last comment here that I felt like you needed to hear. I think it's Rubizai saying, I must say that the fact that Peter could come here on a women's platform to be grilled is great. Can we say he made himself vulnerable? I think yes, we can. It speaks volumes when a man can actually speak about something that's not cars, soccer, and politics. Thank you, Sandra, for okaying this. So you guys being a partnership, we know you talked about it and you said it was okay, and we thank you for your knowledge. I mean, I have to agree with Rumbizai here, and she says, like, even the comments that you were making, it means that you actually reading about this, you're listening to these conversations, and you're there as an ally for us to get to where we want to be, because it's not about men against women or women against men. It's really about us being human, and to be human is to love. We all want the best for ourselves, for this generation, and for the generation to come. Our children needs to have lesser problems, lesser gender-based violence issues. This toxic masculinity has to go. And so we are going to invite you again, Peter. Definitely, please accept the call. And I think we'll have even more men and a panel, and I know Suzu is working on some things on her side to just get us to have more of these conversations and, maybe change the world one day at a time. So thank you again for sharing the stage with me. I will let you go and just give the last remarks to everybody.
No, thank you very much for having me on the platform. It's been awesome. I was looking forward to it. I always enjoy like sharing opinions and, having different conversations with people. I always take everything, to heart with regards to how people see things and, how they view the world. And that only makes me realize that we're all human beings trying to make things better and trying to figure things out. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for representing all the good men. Cheers to you.
I hope so.
Okay, ladies, you heard it from Peter. And I mean, I had my nuggets that I just needed for us to just go over because, I started this live late. So we have heard that good men are out there. So what needs to happen is that we don't need to settle. We don't need to push the nice men away if they are being good. Don't punish them for the other guy's mistakes. If he's proving that he can be trustworthy, give him a fair chance. The narrative, all men are trash, is wrong. We cannot bracket all men as trash and want to find good men out there. So I'm appealing to you, now that you know, or now that you're aware that the good men actually are there, please treat them well and not, project your past on them. So there's also something that I wanted to say, that we need to release ourselves from these limiting thoughts that and allow ourselves to enjoy the nice things. So some of the myths have been busted, like all men cheat. So that you asking for a faithful man is not out of this world, is not out of the question. And if that's what you deserve, you cannot settle for anything less. So you might be thinking, you know what, the devil I know is the one that I'm settling with, because what I hear from the outside is that no one else is actually enjoying marriage or partnerships. That is not true. Do not settle for what you don't deserve, because they are limiting beliefs that we are using to decide what we settle for. So example being all men are trash, that is a statement that has to go. And the last thing is, we have to hear or listen to what Peter was saying. There are values, there are things that are instilled in our men that they have to work on. They decide to treat a woman right, or they decide that they're going to be good. But sometimes their good is not good because of how they were brought up. So if we're going to be taking this issue seriously, we have to recognize the brokenness in the world and know that as broken people, we can also be breaking others. So we have to do the work in ourselves so that we attract the right people. And if we do attract broken people, we do not allow them to remain toxic, but help them to recognize their brokenness by letting them go and pointing out the areas that you feel they should work on. Like we said, truth in love, you do not tell a person how to drive their life. You don't try to control them, but you choose what is best for you. So that's it about today, guys. I hope you learned a lot. I sure did learn a lot from Peter, and I hope that the guys that we get on the platform will also shed a little light into the mind of a man. Just to check the few comments that you guys have put here. My friend and sister Sandra, still being funny. Thank you for recognizing the leader. We see you, girl. We see you. Susie says, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. It's nicely done. Peter, that's your message. Thank you. Susie also says, I agree. I will meet a great man that is faithful, loving, kind, and will build our own Eden together and make changes in this world. Yes, girl. I'm with you. I'm also going to meet that guy. And oh, yes, girl, you definitely will. Sandra just endorsing that. Guys, thank you so much for joining. You've been with me for the past hour and 30 minutes. Sure. Thank you so much. This was lovely. Have a good evening and a good week ahead. Cheers.